My name is Janelle. I'm a 21-year-old student living in France. Tired of not finding true love, I decide to lose my virginity with my best friend. And then I find a fantastic friend with benefits with which I get along wonderfully on all levels. For 3 months. And then comes the time to dump me because I still love my ex. I'm pretty fragile, so I kind of self-destructed and tried to hurt myself. And I was sent to the emergency and then the mental hospital. For the smart ones among you, you'll have understood that I was already in depression for a few months, with a strong penchant for alcohol. To complete this auto-destruction mechanism, what better than adding dating apps to the equation? A few weeks after my release from the mental hospital, I match up to make new encounters and especially forget my dear and tender friend with benefits. I always meet the guys at home for a first date, because I have zero experience and that's what I did for my very first date. One fine day comes around when I match a guy. Let's call him Matthew. Matthew isn't very beautiful and has a few extra pounds, but I'm not Beyonce either, so I match him. We laugh a little, we have some common interests, and especially he smokes weed, so I thought, perfect, plan to smoke some joints between two people. He gives me some personal information like his address, no idea if it's real or not, and his job, or rather old job, that he had just gotten fired from. Work or not work, I don't care, I don't want to do my life with him anyway. I explained to him that I'm pretty fragile and that I had just come out of a mental clinic, and that I'm depressed, blah blah blah. It's all for the sole purpose of making him understand that you can't play with me. I also tell him that I'm looking for a sex session, but still with discussion, complicity, hugs, etc., and not just a shot in 20 minutes and then it's done. He assures me that that is what he's looking for too, and that he's actually very cuddly. Well, perfect. After only about 1 or 2 days of discussion, we agree on a date. A mojito party at my house, and he brings some joints. Matthew arrives and he's really not cute, even worse than the photos. He has a dirty look like greasy hair and a stained t-shirt, a style of teenager who's still looking despite his 26-year-old. In short, I am far from wetting my panties, but I desperately need company. I offer him to make the drinks while I choose a film on television. He runs and passes on the kitchen side to prepare 2 mojitos before joining me on the sofa. We talk for a bit. He's not very smart or interesting. I finish my drink hoping to animate the party alone, and this is a 3-day blackout. According to our dear Matthew, we would have then drank and smoked while watching a film before going into the bedroom. I vaguely remember being naked on my bed and seeing him dressed above me looking at me before turning his heels and slamming the door. My phone was not charging and my alarm clock was not ringing. I was away from a work group appointment, so my friends were worried and they called me. They couldn't get a hold of me, so they reached out to my sister, but she also goes to voicemail. The girls come down from my house and ring again and again, but no answer. They call the fireman, who managed to open the bottom door but not the door to my apartment. They knock on the door calling me, and I eventually end up opening the door. Dressed in a blanket to hide my nakedness, I look at them with incomprehension. The firemen concluded that I was hungover and they break up, while my friends help me get dressed. They also think that I drank too much. They notice that my body is covered with yellow betadine on my arms, legs, and stomach. I told them that I had burned my arm yesterday and that I wanted to heal myself, but no sign of a burn or anything on my arm. And besides, I don't even own betadine. They take my cat and take me back to one of their houses since I was in a comatose state. I was having trouble speaking, and honestly, I even had trouble thinking. The next day, my sister comes to pick me up so that I can stay with her for a few days. Everybody's convinced that I tried to end myself with drugs and alcohol. I start complaining about pain in my groin, and my sister takes me to the hospital. Over the course of a week, I make a series of appointments for blood samples, urine samples, etc. and I went to file a complaint with the testimony of my friends who met me at home and my sister who took care of me. After talking about it for around me to people my age, older people, but especially medical staff and the police, the term organ trafficking was more than mentioned. They think the guy chickened out at the last minute. And despite my complaint, my bed full of bedding, my underwear torn off, and the blood on the doors of my apartment, I would like to point out that I used to drink and smoke in addition to my treatment, and that never before had I had a blackout of 3 days. I'm pretty sure that he put something in my drink. I am originally from rural northern Ontario, Canada, and I've always spent most of my time in the woods and nature, regardless of where we moved. Over the years, I've seen some weird stuff, but this experience surely takes the cake. When I was 16 years old, living with my mom in ruralish New Jersey, my best friend and I had an experience that we both still remember vividly, and my wife wants me to share the story to see what people think we saw. Now my buddy and I, we used to cut through this farmer's field between my mom's neighborhood and our local mall, maybe a mile or so long. It rarely had crops over the years, maybe 1 year of corn and a few years cutting through if I remember it right. The field was barren on this day and we were headed to the mall to hang out, and we didn't notice anything unusual on the way to the mall through the field. We stayed at the mall for about an hour or two and we went back through the field to get back to my mom's. We didn't drink or eat anything in the mall that I remember. No drugs or alcohol either. When we got to the tree line between the field and the mall, we saw a handful of people all dressed somewhat similar, in overalls of some sort, plaid shirts collecting things off the ground. I figured that they were harmless and we knew the old guy's name who owned the field, so we probably wouldn't get yelled at if we name dropped it. As we made our way through the field and got closer, I remember feeling a lot of static energy. It looked like they were picking up smoking coals off the ground and throwing them into buckets. It was weird, but we didn't say anything to these folks and just kind of skirted around them until we were nearing the tree line back to my mom's neighborhood. We heard a loud whooshing noise, sort of like an air compressor. We turned back and there was a group of 6 identical white-suited men with helmets that looked like they were from Daft Punk, and they seemed to be shooting, silently like their weapons made no noise, at the folks picking those things up off the ground. Their sidearms looked like the guns used to spread weed killer or a paint sprayer, really long and thin. They didn't seem to notice us watching until my friend went into a panic and started freaking out. I grabbed him by his shirt and started dragging him toward the tree line, but he was in some sort of shock. I looked back as we were running as they were all facing us but not pursuing. My friend went home and we didn't talk to each other for about a week. Everyone we told to date has said that we were mad, minus my wife and father. I will say after the initial whooshing sound, we never heard another noise, not even a cricket for the whole encounter, until we made it back across the tree line. I'm curious to see what you all think. I am new to this, but my wife said that this was a glitch and other people have strange encounters and might want to hear them. My family and I had a caravan in a holiday park in NSW. We would go there every school holiday and there were many kids that I used to run around and play with. I have fond memories of this place where I learned to ride a bike and I had my first kiss, but other memories are not as good, and now leave me with that egg flip feeling in my stomach. The people that owned the caravan park had a son. He was roughly 25 and I had to have been around 5 or 6 at the time. He would drive around the park and collect everybody's trash on a tractor and do other odd jobs like this to help out his parents. Every once in a while he would pull up when I was playing out the front and asked if I wanted to go for a ride on the tractor. I, being young and naive, of course accepted and jumped on because what child doesn't want to ride on a tractor? This was back in the days where parents would let their children play in the streets without much supervision, and you just came back home when these streetlights came on. One day when he dropped me back to our van, my dad came storming out, grabbed me by the arm and yanked me off the tractor. Without saying a word to the man, he took me inside and told me to never ever hang out with him again. "I don't want you hanging around with that man again," he said without saying why. "But he's nice, he gives me lollipops," I say. "Just don't do it, I'm telling ya. Don't talk to him," he replied. Now I couldn't understand why my dad didn't want me talking to the nice man who only gave me tractor rides and lollipops and hugs, and sometimes the occasional sandwich. I remember telling the man one day, "My dad said I'm not allowed to talk to you anymore," to which he smirked and replied, "Oh yeah, why is that?" Now fast forward nearly 14 years later, my family and I are watching the news when the man's face flashes across the screen, attached to a story where he had killed 2 people, and now he's serving time in prison. My dad called over, look at this. I knew that he was bad news there. It was always just something about him. Do you remember when he used to take you around in that tractor?" My blood ran cold and my stomach dropped. And the most disturbing part, he killed people with pills that he would call his lollies. Please always listen to your parents. My God, I would be gone by now if it wasn't for them. I have a story to share with you, one that still gives me goosebumps whenever I think about it. It happened a few years ago when I was still in college and living in a small apartment by myself. One night, I was lying in bed trying to fall asleep when I heard a strange noise coming from my living room. It sounded like something was shuffling around out there, and I immediately sat up in my bed, heart racing. I tried to tell myself that it was probably just my imagination, or maybe a neighbor making noise in the hallway. But then I heard it again, louder this time, and I knew that someone was definitely in my apartment. I slowly got out of bed and tiptoed to my bedroom door, trying to stay as quiet as possible. I didn't want whoever was out there to know that I was awake and aware of their presence. As I peeked out into the living room, my heart sank. There was a man there, looking through my belongings as if he was searching for something. He was tall and lanky with messy hair and dark clothes that blended into the shadows. I froze, unsure of what to do next. Should I call out for help, try to get out of the apartment, or try to confront him myself? Before I could make a decision, the man turned around and saw me standing there. His eyes widened in surprise, and for a moment, we just stared at each other in silence. And then he spoke, his voice low and menacing. "Don't you move," he said, "or I'll hurt you." I was paralyzed with fear, unable to even scream. I don't know what he wanted or why he was in my apartment, but I knew that I had to do something before it was too late. I took a deep breath and lunged forward, hoping to catch him off guard, but he was quicker than I had expected, and he grabbed me by my shoulders, pushing me back against the wall. For a few moments, we struggled together, him trying to overpower me and me fighting back with all my strength. But eventually, he was able to subdue me, and I felt a sharp pain in my side. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in the hospital with a bandage around my stomach. Turns out that the man had stabbed me during our struggle. I never found out who he was or why he had targeted me, probably just a common robbery that went bad. But the experience left me shaken and traumatized, and to this day I still have nightmares about that terrifying night in my small apartment. After the attack, I became very anxious and paranoid. I had trouble sleeping, and every little noise and creak in the apartment would send me into a panic. I ended up moving out of that apartment and into a more secure building, but I still struggled with fear and anxiety for months after that. It took a lot of therapy and support from friends and family to help me overcome the trauma of that night. But eventually, I was able to move on and start living my life again. Looking back on the experience, I realize how lucky I am to still be alive. The man who attacked me could have easily done much worse, and I will never forget how close I came to losing my life that night. Now I always make sure to take extra precautions to keep myself safe. I always lock my doors and windows, and I never let strangers into my home. And while I can never fully shake the fear that still lingers from that night, I am grateful for the strength and resilience that I have gained as a result of surviving such a scary experience. I remember the night that changed my life. It was a stormy, dark evening in late October, and I was walking home from my late shift at the local grocery store. The wind was howling and the rain was pouring down in sheets, making it nearly impossible to see where I was going. I had my hood up, but it did little to shield me from the weather. My only solace was the knowledge that I was nearly home. As I approached the small, rundown house that I had rented, I noticed that there was a light on in the living room. That was odd, as I always had turned off all the lights when I left. I tried to shake off my unease and I went inside, calling out to see if anyone was home. There was no answer. The living room was empty, but the light was on, casting an eerie glow over the room. I started to feel uneasy, and my heart started pounding in my chest. Suddenly, I heard a noise from upstairs, like footsteps on a creaky floorboard. I froze, unsure of what to do. I called out again, but there was no answer. I slowly made my way up the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached the top, I saw that the door to my bedroom was open, and that the light was on inside. My heart racing, I slowly pushed the door open. Inside, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was a figure standing in the corner of the room, shrouded in darkness. I couldn't see any features, just a vague outline of a human form. I tried to back away, but my feet wouldn't let me. The figure started to move towards me, and I felt a cold sweat break out all over my body. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The figure was almost upon me, and I could feel its cold breath on my face. Suddenly it lunged at me, and I fell backwards, hitting my head on the floor. When I woke up, I was lying there, my head pounding. The room was empty and there was no sign of the intruder. I stumbled to my feet, trying to remember what had happened. Had it all been a dream? But then I saw something that sent a chill up my spine. There was a message scrawled on the wall, written in what looked like blood. It read, "Leave now before it's too late." I knew then that I had to get out of that house, and I packed a bag and left that same night. But even now, years later, I can't shake the feeling that something's following me or I'm being watched. That thing or whatever it is still out there waiting for me. I'm sure that it's just paranoia, but I'm still scared to death of that thing. I've tried to forget about that night, but it haunts me still. Sometimes in my darkest moments, I wonder if I made it out alive at all. Maybe I'm still trapped in that house and the figure is still lurking over me. I know it sounds crazy, but I still feel like it's following me. I'll be walking down the street and catch a glimpse of something in the shadows, and I'll know that it's there, watching me. I've tried to tell people about what happened, but nobody really believes me. They think that it might have just been an intruder trying to rob me, nothing more than that. They honestly think I'm crazy, and I'm starting to wonder if they're right. Maybe I'm really just imagining it all and there really is nothing to be afraid of. But still, when I start to doubt myself, something will happen that will remind me of that night. A simple gust of wind, a flickering light, a creaking floorboard, and I'll be transported back to it.